All right, well, thank you all so much. I'm going to jump right in since we're running out of time. Now, I've noticed in the chat, there's lots of people asking for book recommendations. And for Laura and Andrea, I was wondering when I am in the bookstore or at the library and I have a book in front of me that I don't know, just very briefly, what are some things I should be looking for to know whether or not this is an authentic representation? Where should my mind be going?
So this is something that I teach in my children's literature classes and Andrea teaches in her literacy classes. There are some things you can do. There's no guarantee because the idea of authenticity being, all or nothing or an absolute is problematic in and of itself, but you can always check to see if it's an own voice book. Like in other words, that if it's a book about a marginalized community, is the author a member of that marginalized community? More likely than not, they're going to give it a sense of authenticity because it's their lived experience, right? I think if you want to spend a little bit of time with the book, think about the marginalized identity that the book is focused on, and think about all that horrible, garbagey, awful, stereotypes that you carry around and tropes that we all have that we may not believe, we might not like, but we know we have. Flip through the book, see if a lot of those are reified, if they are, right, if they're sitting there on the page staring you back in the face, it's probably not a great book, right? So those are two, right, really sort of like quick down and dirty. Also, I love the Bechtel test, Alison Bechtel, right? So if there are two, so she did it for women, if there are two named women that talk to each other about something other than a man, right, then it passes the Bechtel test. You can do that with, are there two Black people that are named that talk to each other, right, about something other than whiteness, right? And so those are like three really, again, really quick off the cuff. You can just do it and it becomes almost, it becomes a habit to sort of do a quick check on those.
Super. Yeah, thanks very much. I can see also in the chat that we have lots of different links to other recommended places that people can go look. Andrea, I'd like to step back a little bit. We've been talking, I know, about with Emily about the importance that she felt with seeing her story represented, and also about this question of who gets to tell the narrative, who gets to shape the narrative. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more, I guess, why, just very broadly, why is it important for all students to be hearing from these diverse stories? So if you have a class without many immigrant students, for example, why would we still be telling these stories and other stories?
Great question. Yeah, wow, where do I begin? So if you are in a classroom where you don't have a lot of immigrants students, right, you don't have a lot of newcomers, there is no opportunity to problematize or expand the problematic narratives that often circulate, right? So we see images of Border Patrol, we see images of literal kids in cages, right? And kids need opportunities to engage with concepts, topics, things that are happening in their classrooms. And so whether or not you have immigrant students, you might have a classroom full of white middle-class kids. Those kids, more than anyone, need to have opportunities to unpack what they're seeing and to think about, does that image represent something that I think is true? Does this image represent something that I value, right? And so I always say this to my students, is that there's this misrepresentation that we need to go into schools where there's kids living in poverty, where there's high numbers of kids of color, and we need to do equity work. And it's so interesting because the work I think that needs to be happening in those places is about making curriculum, resources, and all of that more equitable. Kids of color, though, don't need lessons on the world being an inequitable place. They already know it, they live it. The kids that actually need opportunities to be sort of just exposed to be able to think critically for themselves are the students who actually don't have opportunities to interact with difference as much as kids in other contexts. So and one of the things that I always say too to my students, Boston University is a predominantly white institution. It is a private institution. We have a lot of white students. We have a lot of affluent students. Like, that's real, right? And many of them are going to go work in white affluent communities. And so I often tell them, like, you have a responsibility as a white person, as a person with a lot of privilege, to facilitate or at least open up conversations that critically examine power structures, because otherwise they're not happening. I meet a whole lot of 20-something-year-old kids who have never had a chance to think about the privilege that they have when they move through the world. And so I think the more that we can invite those kinds of conversations with young people, the more we stand a chance to do better and maybe actually enact some change. Hopefully that answers that.
Thank you. There's so much that could be said on that, but
Yeah.
thank you for starting. I wanted to turn next to Jill and ask, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about a resource that I love that's on your website, which is your teacher guides. If you could introduce them to the group just so that they know about them, and if there's anything else that we should know as teachers.
Thank you. Yes. So Lionel Books strives to make a teacher's guide for all of our books, both our front list and new release titles, but as well as our backlist. We know that educators are using books. They may be 30 years old, but if that's the book that solves that teacher's, need in that unit, then it deserves, a high quality and up-to-date rigorous guide. It is something that, many publishers do create educator resources, but sometimes they can just be maybe some discussion questions or an activity. And we very much feel, particularly because of our mission around our books, that we can't just throw these books into the wild and guess that teachers know how to approach them and use these really complex and sensitive subject matter, or even assume that the adults who are going to be leading these discussions have all the history of the subject matter. And so to, come to a place of come in terms of humility, in terms of this is not scripted, it's not an expectation of the only way to use it. We love seeing once these books go into classrooms or into story programs through libraries, educators come up with 30 new ways to use these books. So our guides do keep getting longer, despite what our poor marketing team's like, why are they 12 pages? They're like, there's so many layers. There's so many ways to use them. You don't want to kneecap any one book if it has the legs to really go far.
Yeah, thank you. And so now we're coming to the end of not just the session, but of the entire conference. And I don't think I'm allowed to say that we saved the best for last, because there have been lots of bests in this conference, but I certainly think that we're ending on a highlight, because this is something that's both so important and also something that you can just go ahead and implement right away. I know whenever I've seen your previous webinars or go to Lionel Books, I end up with way too many new books in my shopping cart. So I just wanted to end by asking the three of you just to tell us very briefly in a minute or two, like, what is the one final thought that you'd like to leave our participants with as we go back into our teaching and summer vacations for some of us? What is your final thoughts? What should we take away from this conference and this session? Laura.
Okay, so in the chat I put it, but I always, please don't use Amazon. Please just stop it. Just don't do it anymore. Okay. That fool doesn't need any more of your money, right? He's not putting anything back into communities. No, stop it. Find independent bookstores, find IndieBound online, go directly to publishers. Okay, there are lots of other places. Go to libraries. Libraries will love you. Libraries actually get more money from the cities the more books that we take out. And I understand no one can return library books on time, but so what? It's $1. Just shut up. No more Amazon. Okay. That's it. I'm done. Thank you.
Oh, Brittany Hay has a good library. They have every single book that we mentioned. Love that. My final thought is going to be that as teachers, you can make a big impact with small choices. I actually think sometimes this work is overwhelming and scary. And the question earlier about, like, what do we do in a conservative political context when we're not allowed to say certain words or use certain books? It feels very stifling. But I think if you can just take it almost like one book at a time and know that you are really just trying to humanize the kids in your classroom and the human beings that live in our country with us, you can make these little choices and you plant seeds that are really important. So never sort of underestimate the impact that you can make. And that's actually for better or for worse sometimes, but.
Yes, I will give kudos to both of those. I think number one, please use your public librarian. You can, as an educator or as a school librarian, you get to take out, 50 books compared to even just as an individual. They can do the heavy lifting. The librarians are watching all the awards. They're attending the webinars so that you don't have to. They will help you cut through the noise, because it is overwhelming if on a Wednesday at 10 o'clock at night, you're trying to use a search engine to figure out what you should use. That to feel like, oh my gosh, this has never been done before. And there's great resource out there. And then two, do not feel fearful in terms of this is a crazy climate that we're in, but a lot of it is noise. 99% of the time, no one challenges it. And if a book is challenged by a colleague, by a parent, by an administrator, reach out to the publisher, reach out to your library to give you the awards, give you that ammo to really defend those books.